All right, thank you for joining us on 7 After 6. I'm Garrett Domblewski. I'm joined with Shane Garrabrant tonight, one of the candidates for Watertown City Council. Shane, we'll start with, what it is that made you first interested in running in this race.
Yeah, so I had a few reasons. I mean, I'm a lifelong Watertown resident. I'm fourth generation or so, and I'm very passionate about the city. I love living in the city, and on top of that, I have a young family. I have two daughters, 3 and 1, and it was important for me to be able to raise them in the city and for them to have the same type of childhood that I had. And so wanting to do that, seeing the trajectory that we're on as a city in terms of, quality of life, in terms of public safety, in terms of, taxes, it was all something that concerned me. And then another issue is, the hydro issue, the end of the National Grid contract in 2030. I'm a licensed electrical engineer. I was on the Hydro Commission a couple of years back, so I'm very familiar with that issue, and I felt like I had something to offer on that maybe some of the other candidates didn't. And so a combination of those factors are what had me jump into the race.
Mm-hmm. So that was kind of one of the questions I was going to ask, is the top 3 issues that you kind of think are facing the city. It sounds like you'd say hydro, quality of life.
I'd say number 1 definitely is the budget, is that we're looking at rising budget deficits. We're looking at a $3 million budget deficit this upcoming year, which would be around a 25% tax rate increase. But by 2029, I believe it's projected to be a $14 million budget deficit, so you can kind of do the math on what we'd be looking at by that point. And so the hydro issue ties into that because we make $5 million a year roughly off that contract, so it's 10% of our city's revenue. So losing that would be another hit to an already bleak budget situation. So I think that's definitely number 1, and those two kind of go together. The other one I'm hearing a lot about is the homelessness issue. That's something that's new to our area. It's definitely been, I think, top of people's mind in the summer months where it's definitely more visible. And tying back to, having a young family, that's something where young families are going to be concerned about that. One of the biggest perks of our community is having our safe, walkable neighborhoods. And if you don't feel safe doing that, then one of your core identities is missing. So that would be something that definitely needs to be addressed. And I got that ties into quality of life. So I feel like I guess those are my top 3. And all have been kind of not kicked down the road, but they've all been around for a few years as issues. So it's something I think that if elected, I'd like to work with City Council to address some of these long-term issues.
Well, we'll get back to hydro because there's a lot to talk about there.
Absolutely.
But on homelessness, obviously there's some housing projects in the works, and different groups have pulled together to help, at least specifically in the winter with the warming shelters and things like that. That helps keep people off the streets and keep them fed and warm and all these things overnight. But what do you see as a way or a thing that the city should be doing or could be doing that it isn't doing that could help with that?
Yeah, 2 things that I would like to pursue as a council would be, one, I think, so it's mostly in the county's court, I believe, in terms of responsibility. And so I'd like, though, to work with the county. I'd like to see some sort of task force formed where the city officials work with county officials, even state officials, get law enforcement involved in that, as well as nonprofit organizations. Get all of those people in a room and talk about root causes, possible solutions, what's working currently, what's not working, even if there's certain individuals that are known to be just on hard times that just need a little help. So a collaborative approach among all the different parties that interface with that issue. That'd be the first thing I'd like to see. The second thing is, it's something I'd like to investigate. I don't know if it's feasible or not, but one of the biggest areas that is impacted by the homelessness issue is Public Square, you guys actually had a story, a month or 2 ago of them closing the Strauss walkway at night due to the homelessness issue, and that impacted me just because when I first moved back from college and got an apartment in Watertown, it was on the square. I lived above Spokes at the time. It's now the Bad Apple downtown. And so I had to park in the JBY's parking lot and walk up the Strauss walkway to get to my apartment. And having like a homelessness encampment there would be a real deal breaker. And at that point, there was a small community of young people, young professionals that all took pride in living in the square, and that's something I'd like to. I think it kind of went away after COVID. It's something I'd like to see come back, and that would be a real deterrent. So, addressing that on Public Square, I think I'd like to see if there's a possibility of having a police presence on the square. My grandfather was a city police officer. He served 20 years, and part of his patrol at one point was he was stationed on foot patrol on the American Corner. And I'd like to see if it's possible, even just during peak hours of 11 to 1 or 4 to 7, something like that, having some sort of presence there so that people are going down there to work, to shop, to eat, they feel safe. And then if there's any law enforcement issues that happen during those times, there'd be a presence there to solve it quickly. So those are two possible solutions that I'd like to investigate.
Do you think it is a solvable issue? Because I think a lot of times we're a little bit behind the times in terms of the problems that we face or the benefits that we might see from certain things that are happening in other parts of the state or country. So as it becomes a bigger issue here, do you think that is something that is just a natural evolution of sort of the times we're in economically, or is it something that the city and the county can maybe curb a little bit and help some of these people get off the street?
It might not be solvable 100%. It does seem it's not just a Watertown problem. It's a statewide, nationwide problem. But I do think that it could be addressed a little more locally. And I think too that I think there is a lot happening behind the scenes of that, but some of that isn't getting communicated and passed down to the public. So I think some of it's just kind of communication element that needs to be improved as well.
So let's switch to hydro then. You've got a lot of experience dealing with that and thinking about what the future of that will be like. What do you think the solution is there? We're not going to make up $5 million, but what can we do? Yeah,
so what I've been recommending and what I'm still would like to push for is the recommendations of the Hydro Committee's report. That was a consultant with 30 years experience, Skip Trimble. He's been in the news quite a bit lately, helped with that report. And his recommendations was basically to sell various power products, not just the kilowatts, but also the capacity, the spinning reserve, the VARs, sell those to the New York State ISO directly, bring in revenue that way, and then form a community choice aggregate, a CCA, which is basically a mechanism that allows you through a third party to buy power wholesale off the market and sell it to residents, and so bring in some revenue that way. They did have a work session on that on Tuesday. It was very informative. I thought it was a great first step, and it was illuminating in terms of that the CCA was community choice aggregate was presented as our best option. I did have some more questions that were raised from that in terms of the amount of people that you need to make the CCA happen, but I think as a first step, that's questions are going to come up. It's not going to be a smooth solution just due to the complexity of it. So I'd like to definitely keep moving forward with that recommendation and see where it goes. And like you said, you're not going to make the $5 million up. Some of the projections, it varies, but if we can make even half of that back, I think then that would be, a pretty good outcome for the city.
Mm-hmm. Then projecting that for the deficits that the city will be facing, losing that $2.5 million on top of the other, which are probably factored in, but the number is big that we're looking at over the next year, the following several years. Without raising taxes, it's unlikely that we find a large revenue stream to replace hydro or anything else. But what do you do to avoid raising taxes?
Well, I think I'd like to have two approaches. with the council. I think one, in the short term, I think you're going to have to look at making cuts in terms of personnel or services. It's no one wants to have to do that, but I think it's the only way to be able to trim that much expenditure from the budget. So the way I would personally like to go about that, being an outsider, you're not going to know exactly where some of these cuts can be made. I think you could definitely, it'd be reasonable to say you could start at the 20 or so positions that they've added in the past few years. But what I would like to recommend is early in January, whoever's elected, whoever's on council, say to the city manager of, hey, we know what we're looking at in terms of a tax rate increase of 20%, 25% or so. It's not acceptable to the council. That's not going to be acceptable to the community. We would like options presented to us by March, say, of potential things that could be cut, potential areas where we could trim spending, and then once council could give feedback on what they would like to see included in that work session, and then after that, once that's presented, I think it's then that could be on the council to get consensus from the community, because I think one of the big issues in terms of cutting and stuff like that is you talk to going door to door, as I've been doing for quite a few months now. No one wants the tax rate increases to be what they're projected to be. However, everyone has a different idea of what could be cut and what they'd like to see kept in the budget. So I think having that presentation earlier in the year than just when the budget's presented end of April and then you have these marathon budget work sessions in May, I think allows city council time to get consensus from the community and get a true vision of where they want to see the city go. So that's what I'd like to do in the short term. In the long term, I do think I think there's opportunities for the city to bring in more revenue. I think in the short term, yes, we have a spending problem, but in the long term, you're only going to be able to cut so much before there's a drastic impact to the services and amenities that people are used to seeing in the city. So I think in the long term, we need to see if there's ways to bring in more revenue. I'd like to see if there's a way we could attract some sort of large-scale employer to the area. And I know, New York State is not the most business-friendly state, but there are large-scale employers in New York State. There's Corning Glass up in Canton. There's GE in Schenectady. There's several out in Buffalo. And so I'd like to approach those municipalities and see what they did to attract those businesses, and maybe even see if we could reach out to those businesses, see why'd you pick those municipalities, and see if there's ways that we can emulate that as a city to attract something like that to our area. Because I feel like that's what we're really missing is, an employer that hires a wide array of education levels, skill levels, backgrounds, stuff like that. And so that'd be where I'd start. That's something to do, long term. It's not going to happen year one. But you cast a wide net, and all it takes is one employer like that, and you've really changed your area. So that, I think the two-tiered approach of short-term cut spending and then long-term try to raise revenue where you can.
Specifics on the tax rate increases, the last 2 years, 9% and 7% the prior year.
Yep.
Proposals of about 19% going into those budget talks.
Yeah.
So, as you said, 25% potentially being what's being looked at this year.
Yeah.
How do you get to, is a 9 or a 7% number acceptable again? Or how do you get to that, or how do you get lower?
I don't believe it is acceptable again, and even if you're able to do that by trimming, short-term expenses, I think what you're looking at long-term of a $14 million budget deficit, that's not going to go away by pushing off buying a new fire truck or something like that. What you're going to need to do is cut personnel, I believe, just because of the New York State retirement and insurance that really raises those spending associated with those positions. So I think that's where we need to start. It's not going to be fun, but I think that's the only way to go.
When it comes to the golf course,
Yep.
and specifically, I know the golf course has been, everything that needs to be said has been said on it. But when
Yeah.
it comes to Ives Hill now and the
Yeah.
proposal or the request now to potentially have council consider removing the deed restriction, which keeps it a 9-hole golf course instead of an 18-hole course, giving sort of Thompson Park Golf Course a leg up when it comes to the number of holes and the style of golf played there. Where do you stand on that? Do you think that's something that could be revisited, or do you think that shouldn't be touched?
I think the city would have to be compensated in some way for giving up that deed restriction. I mean, I think that would be up for negotiation, but I think that that whole proposal, it brings back to people why so many were so strongly against the golf course purchase to begin with, because it puts the city in kind of a really almost a conflict of interest. Of the city government should be most concerned with improving the community, and I do believe that Ives Hill returning to 18 holes would be an improvement to the community. But that being said, the city government is in the golf course business, and so you'd essentially be helping a competitor for nothing, and city taxpayers paid an exorbitant amount for that deed restriction, whatever you believe the final number to be. So to give that away for nothing, I think many city residents, from what I've heard, would see that as a slap in the face. So I think if that were to even be considered, we'd have to be compensated in some way for giving that up.
Do you think that when it comes to the Thompson Park Golf Course, that it is in the best interest of the city to continue running it, or do you think that it should be, other options should be considered?
Again, because it's, for the community, I'd like to see it kept open. However, with our budget situation being what it is, I think, we got to see how the books turned out for this past season. I think if it was close to breaking even, then we give it another go. I think whatever the decision is made, it neither needs to be that you're shutting it down after this year, or you're going to keep it open for 2 to 3 years and make a real run at this. Because from what I'm hearing, I've heard, that as of, last month maybe, they weren't even accepting reservations for tournaments next year because they didn't know what the situation would be. And those are the ways you make money in the golf course business. So I feel like if we find out that it was close to breaking even, if we feel like as a city that it can get relatively close to breaking even, then we have to commit to it for 2 to 3 years, because I feel like hemming and hawing over whether it should stay open, whether it should close, that's not going to help the actual business itself. So if we decide that we're going to keep it open for another year, we should, try to commit to multiple years to get, the stability that a business like that would need.
And how about the zoo? We'll stay in Thompson Park. Where do you stand on funding for the zoo, future funding for the zoo, and just thoughts on that in general?
Yeah, and so I think being one of the only candidate, I believe the only candidate with young kids, I think the zoo I have a unique perspective on that. My wife and I are members of the zoo. We take our daughters up there pretty regularly, and it's great for children, great for the community, it's educational and stuff like that, but we're not in the position to be giving them hundreds of thousands of dollars a year over year in perpetuity. What I've called for is, I think that should be some sort of work session where you have the Dr. Irwin, the director of the zoo, maybe bring in the other people that run the zoo, and have them answer some questions, open the books to see where the money is going, and not to be confrontational, more as informative to the council, because we've donated the money over the past several years, or invested the money over the past several years, but there's no real answer to where that money's gone. I'm just curious of what their priorities are. I've read, when they put out their 5-year plan, it seems like it's very heavy on trying to get some sort of New York State accreditations of being a zoo. As an outsider, I know nothing about running zoos, but as an outsider, it seems like that's somewhat inside baseball. That's not going to be something that actually attracts new visitors to the zoo. So that's more of what I'm curious on, is if there's ways that we as a city government can help them beyond, just monetary donations.
Do you think the county should have a larger role in funding the city?
I think I do. I think it benefits more than just the city. I think I do think that the county could chip in more, especially if we've been throwing in money year over year. But that's their decision. I'm not on the county ledge. I don't know their money situation, but from an outsider's perspective, it does appear like that would be in the best interest of the county.
When it comes to the folks who will still be on council in several months, when January comes around, do you consider yourself aligned with any of them, or do you think you would have more of an independent voice?
I wouldn't say I'm aligned. I think I have common ground with all three members that would still be on council come January. So I think I'd be able to work with all of them and find different areas that we'd all have aligned interests. But I plan on being an independent voice who stands up for what I believe, what I feel is best for city residents. So yeah, I think I'll be able to bring a cohesive approach to council, a collaborative approach. I don't plan on working siloed. I plan on trying to reach out to different council members at different times and get their opinions on things. But I will still take an independent view based on what I find is in the best interest of the city.
Shane, anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to talk about, or you think are other issues that voters should be, that you'd like to hear your stance on?
Nothing specific. I think what I would like them to know is that I feel as though the past few years, just from the dysfunction on council in terms of some of the conflicts and stuff like that, that at times the voice of the taxpayer has been lost along the way, and that's something I'm going to strive to be a true voice for the city residents. I'm going to be someone that you can always reach out to and tell your opinion and know that it'll be heard and it'll be considered, and that I'm on the younger side, and I may not have the experience of others running, but I'm a fast learner, and I am a hard worker. I intend to outwork anyone else that's on that council. I intend on putting in the time to be informed on any issue that shows up on that agenda, as well as these long-term issues. And yeah, I think I strive to bring a proactive approach to city council. I feel like the past few years, it's been more reactive to whatever appears on the agenda. Again, most likely because of some of the conflicts and stuff that's existed. It's hard to be collaborative and proactive in that environment. But that's something that I'll strive to do is not just looking at what's on the agenda that week, but looking down the road of ways that we can benefit the city and improve the city over multiple years. So I think those are the things I'd like the city residents to know.
All right. Well, Shane, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Election day, November 4th. We'll speak with Shane. We've spoken with Shane. We spoke with Pete Monaco on Tuesday. We'll have the other two candidates, Anthony Velasquez and Doug Osborne, in to talk with us as well. So, folks, thanks for watching us at home. This has been 7 after 6. I'm Garrett Domblewski. Shane Garrabrant. Have a good night.